my mind is made up.
Hey guys, this is Eric Kyle, publisher of Latitudes and Attitudes magazine.
And I'm David Levesque, editor of Latitudes and Attitudes, and welcome to Three Sheets, our podcast where we chill and chat with individuals making a difference in the cruising lifestyle.
Each episode, we'll dive into all things cruising related and bring you some of the most influential characters out there. So sit back, grab your favorite bottle, light them if you got them, and enjoy the adventure. Hey guys, Eric Kyle here, publisher of Latitudes and Attitudes magazine and partner with David Levesque on Three Sheets, the podcast. Here we explore all kinds of wonderful content that you guys are going to want to dish up in the mornings and consume all day. As a matter of fact, today we've got a very special guest, Chris Landsea with the Hurricane Center. Is that the right way to say that, Chris?
I work at the National Hurricane Center here in Miami, Florida.
So the Hurricane Center is the right way to say that. David, where did you scrounge up this guy to be on the podcast today? We're going to get into some pretty interesting stuff here.
We're going to have some fun. So a couple of years ago, when we were expanding the magazine from 4 issues a year to 6, we decided to create a hurricane preparedness issue. And there's a lot of great stuff. I mean, I was on the list, I think, to get updates from you guys. And there's such great information that comes through the pipeline from your organization that it was like, hey, you know, if we need some stuff on hurricanes, maybe we should just go right to the source, you know, or the grand poobah, apparently. And, you know, somebody put me in touch with you, and somehow, Chris, you got stuck with me. And we did a little bit of an interview, and we had a nice article. And then, I mean, last year, truth be told, we just reprinted that article with a couple of small updates. But this year, I reached out to you, and you said you had quite a few cool updates that were going on at the Hurricane Center. So it's like, let's do a whole fresh article on it, and that's what we're doing for this upcoming issue.
To help out, whatever I can do to get the word out, the newest for the Mariners here.
That's absolutely awesome, Chris. We're glad to have you aboard. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do at the National Hurricane Center, and maybe a little bit on what you've been recently contributing to Latitudes and Attitudes magazine.
Yep. So my branch is called the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch, or TAFB. We're the largest part of the National Hurricane Center. The hurricane forecasters, it's 11 members, get kind of the biggest publicity, but we do wind and wave forecasts all year round. We do it for the whole Gulf, the whole Caribbean, the West Atlantic, and the East Pacific. So we have 10 million square nautical miles of water that we're providing warnings and wind and wave predictions all year round. And so we work certainly very closely with the hurricane forecasters, but it's a separate group, and we really focus on the Mariners.
You know, Chris, I know from talking with you that, I mean, you've shown me some of the, I mean, you sent them to me. We've talked about a few of them before. I mean, you've shown me some of the products that the National Hurricane Center offers. And that's a lot of what I want to dig into on this podcast is just what our cruisers that are out there, you know, whether they be in a position when a hurricane comes up, what should they do to, you know, prepare for it, avoid it? How can they be, you know, given as much advanced warning and heads up as possible? So I want to go through some of the products and stuff like that, so we can, you know, we can play around with that as we go through this podcast as well.
You got it. Certainly for the Caribbean, folks that are cruising down the Caribbean, you got the winter season where a lot of folks enjoy being down there then, which does have its hazards. We do have gale warnings that occasionally crop up during the winter season, but during hurricane season, it's a whole nother kind of level of risk that occurs. And so we do have some dedicated products that are for the Mariners specifically to help keep them safe. Did you want me to start going through a little bit on the hurricane side first, or the wintertime side first?
Can I jump in here real quick? I just want to understand something. We're going to talk about preparedness for hurricanes and how to keep yourself safe, which is great. But what is a hurricane? I mean, let's talk about this for just a moment. I mean, the water heats up off of Africa, and it becomes so hot that the swirling, twirling twister of fate starts to form as it pushes westward. bringing a lot of sand from the Sahara with it as well, I believe. And all of a sudden, it turns into this catastrophic, oh no, storm. So, how accurate is that? Is that a hurricane?
Yeah, so that's a good first approximation of it. So, for mariners, you got two main types of storms to deal with. You got the winter storms, kind of nor'easters that have those cold fronts extending southward from them. But then June to November, we have tropical storms and hurricanes, and these don't have cold fronts. It's warm all the way around the system. The driver for the energetics are the thunderstorms. And so if you get a lot of thunderstorm activity, warm water, a lot of moist air, and a lack of that Saharan air layer that you alluded to, you can get a hurricane. And if it keeps getting stronger, you can get all the way to a category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane, which is we consider major hurricanes. And certainly the risk amps up as you get up to winds 60 knots, 100 knots even, and waves that could get up to 50 feet in the worst case scenarios. So yeah, the winter storms are one level of risk in the Caribbean, but the hurricanes are much more of a concern. The good news is we forecast them pretty darn well nowadays. It's not perfect. It'll never be perfect, but compared to just a generation ago, our errors are cut by 2/3 on where the storms are going to go. And a generation ago, we didn't even make real forecasts of formation of these storms. Now we do a 7-day prediction of where the storms may form and how likely they are. And that's fairly reliable too. So there's a lot of new tools that have been developed over the last few years for mariners to know where the systems may form, how strong they get, and where they're going to go.
Chris, when I was prepping for this next issue and you sent me over, some materials and whatever to look at, I noticed that there's all these different zones. Okay. And you alluded earlier to the zones that the National Hurricane Center, takes care of and reports on and monitors and all that kind of stuff. I always get confused, I guess, in my mind, whenever I see tropical storms. There's always that US model and then this European model. Okay. And I'm sitting back and I'm going, aren't you guys like all working together? So how come the Europeans tend to have a different outlook on how they just read the data differently? What's that mean?
Yeah. So we're using these different spaghetti models. They're computer simulations of the future weather, and there's different ways to do it. There's somewhat different formulas to plug into the computers. There's different observations to assimilate or start up the computer model with to know what's going on now. And so that's good because it gives us different predictions. And what we end up doing on the hurricane side is blending those predictions together to get the best forecast possible. So that's okay. We don't care who the best model is, whether it's the US Global Forecast System or the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. We don't care because we're going to blend the best of them together. And in general, almost for every forecast, our actual prediction is better than any single model. So if a mariner is just like, I like the EC model or I like the GFS, it's really not a good approach because what we're doing is taking the best of those models and pushing them together.
And I think
Are
what's
you
most
using
important to
AI?
our readers when I look at it is, I mean, our cruisers and any kind of mariners that have boats in the water, from super yachts on down to whatever, they know when hurricane season is, right? So it's basically June 1st to November 1st. I'm right about that.
Yeah, the busiest time of year where you get 90% of the hurricanes is August, September, and October. So it's a real short window, 3 months.
Yeah.
The entire season goes 1st of June to end of November. But those 3 months in particular, August, September, and October, are the most at risk because that's when you get the strong hurricanes.
So for the most part, what our cruisers do, and a lot of mariners, whatever, unless you're a commercial mariner, you have to do what you have to do. But you know, recreational mariners, whatever cruisers, they're going to avoid the hurricane zones during hurricane season, so to
Yep.
speak, right? So, but in some cases they're in the area. They can't necessarily just get away from it. Um, so the sooner they can see that something's coming, the more time they can have to prepare. Maybe they have an opportunity to move out of the way far enough, maybe not. But it's still, I mean, sometimes it still blows my mind by how many people just don't heed the warnings and they just literally stay right where they are.
That's the trick is to let people know and have them respond appropriately because some people are kind of like chicken little where they freak out at the first sign something is 20 days away or 10 days away, and that's not appropriate. You don't want, for example, the Coast Guard to close their ports a week in advance of a hurricane. But there's other people like the proverbial ostrich where they're sticking their head in the sand and they are like, oh, it's not going to happen. It hasn't happened in so long. Why should we prepare? And they wait too long. And so it's finding that sweet spot where you're taking action when the risk becomes high enough that the kind of risk reward is worth taking action to safeguard it. And the good thing about a cruiser is it's mobile and they move about the same speed or faster than most hurricanes. Most hurricanes move 10 to 15 knots. And if your cruiser can go that or faster, you can get out of the way if you're taking time to get out of port when a hurricane starts coming. So that's the good news about cruisers is, you can get out of the way. It's not like I can move my house out of the way of the hurricane, but you can get your vessel into the safe waters almost always.
Well, just a real quick question going back to these models that are predictive of when a hurricane's going to hit and so forth. With all of the data that you guys have to go through in order to create these models, are you finding that the evolution of technology and where we're at with AI is helping you guys to get more accurate predictions? And secondarily to that, Chris, I'm curious if somebody's cruising throughout the Caribbean or even on the East Coast or somebody's in the Gulf Coast, what kind of time reference do you have available to you right now to say, in 7 days, this hurricane's going to be on top of you. In 10 days, this hurricane's going to be on top of you, according to all of our information. So that's your window warning opportunity.
Right. So right now, we give a 7-day heads up that a system may form. And so that's your first opportunity to start making some preparations there. At that point, it's not a lot of specifics about winds or waves that are going to be expected locally, but it's at least a heads up that something may be occurring. So you may need to be watching what's going on. Once we do have the weakest system, a tropical depression form, that's when we start doing a 5-day forecast. And so we're giving you a 5-day heads up that you could have impacts on the coast or over the open ocean. Right now, those forecasts, a 5-day forecast, has an average error only of 150 to 200 nautical miles. So if we say in 5 days we got a hurricane coming to Miami, well, really, that's only with the error cone involved. That's from about Havana up to Jupiter, Florida. So about 300 miles across. That's not a large chunk of real estate 5 days in advance. And so a generation ago, that error, instead of 150 miles, was about 400 miles. And so we've really shrunk that error cone down. It's never going to be perfect. So there's always going to be some false alarms. But if you need 5 days to, make preparations for your vessel and get underway to get out of the cone, so be it. You've got that now. And so it all depends on how much time you need to prepare your boat. It's yeah.
One thing I find fascinating, and you touched on this just a couple of minutes ago, when I was looking through the materials you sent me recently, I guess it seems so obvious, but I didn't realize that you provide so much data directly to the Coast Guard so that they know they can prepare what best to do with the bases, whether they're going to shut marinas down or whether they're going to move their vessel. I mean, please expand on that a little bit, what you do with the actual Coast Guard.
I have so much respect for the United States Coast Guard. They have an amazing, very wide-ranging life-saving mission. And one of the biggies is U.S. ports. They're the ones, the captain of the port at the sector makes the decisions on whether to keep the port open or to close the port. And that's a massive economic decision when you look at ports like the shipping channel in Houston, or the Port of Miami or Port Everglades. And so we want them to make a wise decision. You don't want to shut the ports down several days in advance, because that's going to really limit, continuing the economy going and getting those cruise ships in and cargo ships out. But you don't want to wait too long, because if a hurricane comes and you got all these vessels in the harbors and ports, it's going to beat up on the piers and you're going to have sunken boats. So it's finding that sweet spot for them to restrict the ports and close the ports, and not closing ports unnecessarily. So we don't do that for them. We provide them the best information about the exact forecast, as well as kind of probabilistic information. What's the chance, for example, of gale force winds? And then that captain of the port, they've got to make that call. And I'm sure they piss everybody off when they make those decisions. Because a lot of folks want those ports open, but they have to be looking out for the safety of everybody on the vessels, as well as the making sure that the ports themselves stay safe.
Well, just to kind of ask the question again, tell me how you're using AI to help with your predictions and to help with your modeling.
Yeah, so AI has been a great new tool that we started looking at just a little bit in 2024, but this last hurricane season in 2025, we really embraced it. We've been working very closely, for example, with Google DeepMind to investigate their version of the hurricane forecast track. And our hurricane forecasters are naturally skeptical. Sometimes we hear these claims over the decades of something brand new, and it just doesn't work as well. In this case, these new AI models really are excellent, and we've incorporated them into our official predictions, and our forecasts are better because of them. It's not going to make perfect forecasts. We're never going to get there. There's always going to be uncertainty, and that error cone is larger the further out in time. But yes, these new artificial intelligence tools are very, very skillful, and we're using them for our track predictions and our peak wind predictions.
Do you think, Chris, that the error cones are shrinking as a result of your use of AI? And do you predict in the future that as AI grows and improves, that it will significantly help your predictions?
Yeah, so the way we do the error cone is we look at the last 5 years worth of statistics. And we draw a circle, say around the 3-day point, and that circle represents the 67th percentile error. So most of the time, a 3-day forecast is going to be inside that circle. And then we draw a cone around all those circles. And so every year, if the forecast keeps getting better, the cone's a little more narrow. And so because of 2025 being a really good year, the cone in 2026 is going to be slightly smaller. So yes, the cone does get more narrow as the forecasts get better, and we'll see that in 2026. I don't think we've figured out yet how much smaller the cone is going to be. It's usually a few percent smaller on that kind of order, but we'll see as we get closer to June 1.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And there's a very large elephant in the room. Do you see it, David? Global warming. So
Okay.
everybody is screaming that global warming is causing all these massive hurricanes to come up, destroying billions and billions and trillions of dollars of property and boats and everything else. And this year, in 2025, maybe not so much with a lot of hurricanes. So what's your opinion there, Chris? I'm not trying to be political about it. Some people have feelings both ways. I don't care. All I know is that I love to be out on the water. But what's your feeling about what's been happening over the last couple decades? Well, however long you've been doing this, and what do you see for the future as it comes to more hurricanes, less hurricanes, more effective data from you guys to help people to avoid the hurricanes that are out there? What's your opinion on this?
So the question about global warming and hurricanes is a real important one, and it's a bit controversial. It's something I've been involved with during my career as well. And the answer is yes, there is a global warming effect on hurricanes, but it's very nuanced and it's not what you would expect firsthand. So first off, warmer waters do contribute to more energy being available to hurricanes, and so you'd expect them to be stronger. But all the computer models and the theoretical studies suggest even with, say, a 4-degree Fahrenheit warming of the waters in the tropics, that would only lead to about 5% stronger. So something that would have been a 100-knot hurricane without global warming would be a 105-knot hurricane with global warming at the end of this century. And so it's a pretty tiny change in how strong hurricanes will become. Today, there may be a 1 or 2 knots stronger today because of global warming. And that's so small we can't even measure it. Our accuracy for measuring winds is about 5 knots, even 10 knots in a strong hurricane. That's for how strong they get. For numbers of storms, it's even, I think, more surprising is that the modeling work suggests we won't have more tropical storms and hurricanes. We should actually have fewer tropical storms and hurricanes because when global warming affects the whole global climate, it's not just the water temperatures, but it's the air temperatures. It's the moisture in the mid part of the atmosphere. It's the wind shear. And it turns out increased wind shear tearing apart the storms and drier mid levels of the atmosphere lead to fewer, not more, fewer tropical storms and hurricanes. And so that aspect is probably not very well known. It is in the science. I think it's pretty well understood that we'll either have a reduction or very little change in numbers of tropical storms and hurricanes. The thing, though, that will change a fair amount is the saltwater flooding, what we call the storm surge. And that's where the salt water, the ocean, is pushed ashore by the strong winds. And so the storm surge for each hurricane isn't going to change too much, maybe a few percent more if it's 5% stronger hurricane. But in addition to that, there's this sea level rise that global warming is contributing to. And if you look at the last, say, 50 years, global sea levels have been going up 1 inch every decade. It doesn't sound like much, but that could accelerate to getting double or triple that. And we've seen that in my lifetime. My family has a house in Big Pine Key, Florida. We have a Sea Pro. We go out fishing and snorkeling and scuba diving. And we've seen that sea level rise where we've adapted to that by adding an extra 6 inches to our seawall. So because it was overlapping our seawall. And so there's steps you can take to help mitigate that. So when a hurricane comes ashore, if by the end of the century, the sea levels are, say, 2 foot higher or 3 foot higher, each hurricane is going to be that much worse with the saltwater flooding. Because of the sea level rise. So the global warming and hurricanes, it's kind of a mixed bag. Yes, slightly stronger, but fewer, but more saltwater flooding due to the storm surge. To me, that's a pretty big issue. What we do know, though, is that hurricanes tend to go in cycles as well. We have periods where it's very busy and then periods where it's very quiet. And so that seems to be unrelated to man-made global warming. And we've certainly been in a really busy time from 1995 onward. And these busy and quiet periods tend to go for 25 to 40 years. And so we're 30 years now into this busy period since 1995. We'll see if that continues.
So
Chris,
I'm just
I want
going to
to.
buy the house in Florida.
Excuse
Go
me.
ahead, David.
Chris, I want to just ask a quick question about the zones, and then I'd like you to get into just some of the products. I mean, we talked about the products a couple of years ago in one of the
Sure.
issues, which, by the way, we have this magazine called Latitudes and Attitudes, right?
I read it.
You've heard of it. And so a couple of years ago, yeah, look at that nice shirt that Eric's got. Chris, we got to get you a t-shirt, man. We'll send you a t-shirt. Um,
Yes, thank you.
yeah, no problem. So we did this article a couple years ago. We reprinted it last year. This year we got a refresher on it. Before you go into a lot of the different products that the National Hurricane Center offers, I just want to talk about the zones real quick because our cruisers, this magazine is a global magazine. So our cruisers, we have subscribers, digital subscribers, followers, whatever, all over the globe. They're liveaboards. They could be somewhere in French Polynesia. You know what I mean? They could be someplace, in Far East somewhere. All right. They could be right in the Caribbean. They could be in the Mediterranean. So we know the zones that the National Hurricane Center covers. These cruisers, if they're looking for additional information outside of what the National Hurricane Center does, how easy is it for them to find these other zones monitored by other organizations?
Yeah. So I've got good news for you. One of my forecasters who recently moved over to Weather Forecast Office, Monterey, California, redid the guide on global tropical storm and hurricane guide for mariners. And so it goes into all of the products that are available globally, how to access them, good strategies for heavy weather avoidance, a little bit about where storms form, what time of year they form, because it's different in different parts of the world. So I'll make that available to you all. It's right on our website, but that's got all the links to products around the world. So just if I was going out, the products I would be looking at would be from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, which is a combined Navy Air Force facility in Honolulu. So here at the National Hurricane Center, we do the Atlantic and the East Pacific. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center does the rest of the world, where there's tropical storms and hurricanes and cyclones. And so that would be my go-to to see if I was, say, in the South Indian Ocean and La Reunion Island, I would be taking a look at Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast for the South Indian Ocean.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive into some of these products then, because I know we talked a little bit about, just some of the stuff you sent me, but we've talked through some of it already. But I know that you have your centers, and this is something else I found fascinating. You have your monitoring, you have your zones, but there's also there was an organization you mentioned in your materials that you gather information from ships. Right? So ships can actually join. I'll let you talk about it, but they can supply the data, which then goes into the funnel, right, so to speak, of everything else you're doing.
Right. So a lot of commercial vessels are part of the Voluntary Observing Ship Program, or VOS. So this Voluntary Observing Ship Program is a global one. We have a component in the National Weather Service, and we encourage vessels that are going across the open oceans to send us their measurements of wind, of waves, of sea surface temperature, of air temperature, and the barometer. Because the more information we get as forecasters to know what's going on now, the better we can assess what's happening and what the forecast is going to be. And so it may be possible for cruisers to provide their observations. Mike Potocny is the gentleman in charge of the program for the National Weather Service, and I'll provide that information as well. But as forecasters, we need all the measurements possible, whether it's from buoys, ships, radars in space, satellite images, or individual vessels. The better we know, the better predictions we can provide.
Chris, there was an acronym I saw in the materials. It was SOLAS, and that stood for what?
Safety of life at sea. Right. So that's part of the International Maritime Organization's kind of required set of products and services. Every square inch of the global ocean, there's a country responsible for providing free wind and wave forecasts and issuing warnings, whether it's wind-based warnings or visibility warnings for fog. And so the United States, we've got the Northeast Pacific and we've got the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf. And so we're part of that. So when we're doing our forecasts, it's not only the United States National Weather Service, but it's also part of this international maritime organization to help keep vessels and folks over the open ocean safe. And so to me, it's really neat opportunity for us to provide our official predictions that go over and above just a simple computer model guidance.
All right, man, let's dive into the products then, because I'm sitting there thinking that you love this shit, don't you? I mean, it's just, do you ever get time?
But as a little mariner myself with our little Sea Pro down in the Keys, I understand how damn important it is to have accurate wind and wave forecasts, because you can get yourself in trouble real quick if you're not prepared for the conditions that could occur.
Chris, I live on Lake Erie. I know exactly how quickly you can get into trouble.
Oh yeah, that's those winter storms you all get there can just be horrific as well. So it's incumbent on all of us as mariners to be ready for what's going on. So during hurricane season, for the products, the first one is this tropical weather outlook, and it's a 7-day look ahead what system might form into a tropical depression, tropical storm, or hurricane. And so that shows where a system may form and the likelihood, because we ain't good enough to say definitely yes, it's going to become a storm, or definitely no. So we give it kind of the green, yellow, red to try to let folks know that something might occur. Once we do have a tropical system that's formed, we start doing these 5-day advisories where it has the 5-day track, the peak winds, and the size of the hurricanes going out. And the cone also provides information. The cone, I think, gets a little bit overstated, though, because it doesn't tell you what the winds and waves are. It just says what's the likelihood of something going to be inside that cone within the next 5 days, 2/3 of the time. So we have other products to provide information about the hurricane's impacts. And so our job as marine forecasters is to flesh out over the open ocean, and the local weather forecast offices do the same thing within 60 miles of the coast of what those winds and waves are going to be. And then we issue warnings accordingly. So it could be tropical storm or hurricane wind-based warnings. Additionally, there's opportunity for instead of what we call an exact forecast, deterministic, to use uncertainty using a probabilistic approach. So we can also look at what are the chances, for example, of tropical storm winds? What are the chances of hurricane winds spatially? And so that gives you a little more of a window to say, well, if I'm really risk averse, let's say you're a cruise boat that you hire out for tourists, you're going to be very risk averse because your cargo on that tourist boat tweets, and you don't want your cargo tweeting bad things about your company. But if you're a cargo ship, that's a 1/4 mile long, you don't really give a darn until the winds get to about 50 knots or seas about 25 feet. So they're going to be a little less risk averse. And so these probabilities give you a kind of opportunity to fine tune where you want to avoid. And we have a specific product called the Tropical Cyclone Danger Graphic. It's sent out on radio fax, which we'll get to, but it's also on our website. And so that gives you a 3-day window of where tropical storm winds are likely to be, at least 50% chance, and where they might be, at least a 5% chance. So depending how risk averse you are, gives you a zone of where to avoid. So that's really key for us in getting the mariners. And to me, it's amazing. You go to marinetraffic.com, for example, and you can see the AIS transponders of all the cargo ships and the cruise ships and the cruisers. When there's tropical storm or hurricane, that cone it shows where the ships are not. Vessels are doing a great job of getting out of the way 98, 99% of the time. So that's gratifying to me to see that there. So one thing that we're implementing experimentally is a way to show folks with GIS capabilities of where the warnings are for the next 2 days. And that's 3 thresholds of wind: gale or tropical storm force, so that's 34 knots, storm conditions, 48 knots or more, and hurricane conditions, 64 knots. And so we now have this KML shapefile. You click on it, open it up with Google Earth, and voila, you can see exactly where the warning is with regard to where you are at. And so this is the first time we can actually show our marine warnings out over the whole Caribbean or the Gulf or the Atlantic. And so we're excited to have that as a new capability to keep mariners safe. Why? Because no one's reading old-fashioned text bulletins anymore. And no one's using radio fax or Vobra, or very few are using nav text. So these are radio technologies that the Coast Guard still maintains for us. And it's wonderful they do that, because a generation ago, if you're going over the open ocean, especially for cruiser, you had a single sideband radio to get the graphical forecast of what it is now. But we've been hearing everybody's switching, of course, to Starlink. And so everybody's got high-speed internet on now. And so we're slowly starting to say, hey, does anybody use these radio technologies anymore? And if not, we're starting to sunset some of them. Instead, we can go to a full digital capability. And so that's exciting for us to move forward and stay relevant to the mariners and the cruisers over the open ocean. So I'm guessing for a lot of your cruisers, do you think a lot of them are using Starlink or other high-speed internet access?
Yeah, many, but I wouldn't necessarily say all, Chris. What I was going to ask is, these products that you're talking about are available on the National Hurricane Center website. They are links that our cruisers can go to in order to find out additional data about their current position or future position, or even to make a determination on where they want to go cruising to. So is that correct? The products that you're talking about are all available, and they're available for free on the National Hurricane Center website?
Exactly. So since we are a National Weather Service, and we're already paid for by your tax dollars, so thank you for paying your income tax to pay my salary, all of our products are available to everybody for free. And there's text products, there's grids, and there's graphics. And so whatever way you want to access them, you can. We still are using the Coast Guard's transmitters for our radio fax. So radio fax is graphics over the radio. There's also text over the radio with nav text. We actually had long-range radio voice broadcasts called Vobra, but we asked 6 months ago, and virtually no one was using those anymore. So we just turned those off a week ago. And so we're making sure we're not leaving anybody behind before we start transitioning to full digital. But the responses we're hearing is that the age of radio transmission of forecast information is ending pretty quick.
So if I'm crossing the Atlantic and I don't have Starlink and I want to get some information about what's going on out there, the only way that I can do it right now is through a radio transmission. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Well, we certainly still have the radio fax that we are providing, and the U.S. Coast Guard maintains transmitters in New Orleans and California and Honolulu. And so folks can access those from hundreds of miles away. And other countries also maintain radio fax transmitters as well around the world. So yes, if you have a single sideband radio and that's how you access it, that is not going away anytime soon.
Good to hear. So any other products that are out there that you would recommend to cruisers from the National Hurricane Center that's not necessarily a link on your website? what would you say would be an appropriate measure for any cruiser that's out there in open water, blue water, that some measures that they should take for not only their own safety, but just as common sense?
Yeah. So one real exciting development that just happened yesterday, I mean, this is literally hot off the press, is that our colleagues at College Park, Maryland, the Ocean Prediction Center, started providing for their 20 million square miles of ocean, full basin gridded information. So winds and waves and visibility hazards and warnings, all the way up to 60 north latitude, all the way to Europe, and all the way to Japan in the Pacific side. And so this is a big new development that is available now for folks to access on digitalweather.gov if you want to see it that way, or download the grids in a grid reader. You can see the actual data yourself. And this was just turned on, like I said, yesterday, where they've gotten these new capabilities. So if you're a cruiser, for example, going from New England to Bermuda, now we're going to have full basin grids. If you're going from the Lesser Antilles to Europe, we're going to have full basin grids to cover that entire thing. And so, again, this is an improvement over single models. I know there's a tendency once one has high-speed internet to look at windy.com or predict wind because they have some beautiful graphics, but they're single model runs. And so our forecasters are able to adjust these outputs and combine them together and to provide an optimal prediction of the winds and waves. So to me, that's the biggest new thing. Just happened 13 January of full basin grids by the Ocean Prediction Center all the way to Europe and Asia.
Man, and I feel like we got a super like exclusive here on this podcast right now. Seriously, like I completely just like I got goosebumps. I feel like the Three Sheets podcast boys just broke like this exclusive National Hurricane Center news. Like you're gonna hear it first. So Chris, I know that you guys are pretty active with social media. So people can go obviously to your website, but they can follow social media. But you're big on tweeting. I think you guys tweet a couple times a day or something like that. What's going on out there? Want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so we have 16 forecasters in our Marine branch. And in the past, it was issue your forecast and you're done. But now that, high-speed internet is becoming more available over the open oceans, we're realizing that social media can be an important tool for us to interact with the mariners. So right now we're doing that one of three ways. We are doing a manual tweet about kind of the worst conditions of the day, whether it's a tropical storm or a winter gale. We're doing a tweet about that. But we're also, anytime there's a warning issued, we have a auto-generated tweet that goes out within 10 seconds. And so anything over the Gulf, the Caribbean, the West Atlantic, or East Pacific, it's an auto tweet. Here's a new warning that's just issued. And then the last thing is twice a week, we do a video. It's not going to compete with your podcast, but it's a 3 to 5 minute video about the next 5 days over the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the West Atlantic. So we call it the Tropical Atlantic Marine Weather Briefing, and that's available on our Twitter page. And it's also something you can sign up to get by email from Gov Delivery, operated by the U.S. Coast Guard Nav Center in Alexandria, Virginia. And so again, it's not a new product. These tweets aren't new products, but it's another way to engage the mariners and the cruisers and let them know what's going on.
I love it because there's so much stuff that you guys are offering that I love the fact that we're getting a chance to do this podcast because I think there's so much stuff that maybe our cruisers are not aware of that they can get their hands on pretty easily through you guys. But I almost feel like with all this cool shit that you guys have, that there ought to be an app for that. Is that the next thing coming down the government pipeline?
Don't know. I'm not sure. I would hope so, but in the past, apps had been the purview of the private sector. But I'm not sure. You can talk to the director of the National Weather Service. He could let you know.
I got him on speed dial.
Well, I do get that email every week, and I appreciate it, Chris. And I ended up starting to get it after the Miami Boat Show a few years back when I ran across you guys down there out in the lobby at the Miami show and signed up for it. And I find it fascinating. We do a lot of flotillas down in the Caribbean. We've done a lot of traveling down in the Caribbean. My daughter was involved in a sea school called Trex down in the BVI, doing some diving and sailing training, marine biology programs. And while she was down there all summer, I was worried because she's down there June, July, and August. I'm checking this weekly forecast that you guys are providing just to make sure everything is safe down there because she's in hurricane season, right? But no, I appreciate that. I'm curious. As David had mentioned, it'd be nice to have an app for all this. So out of the current apps that are out there, not that we want to endorse any one particular app, but what do you see as probably the best use of a cruiser's thinking and focus? What's the best app out there that a cruiser should use?
I don't know enough about the various apps to really provide a recommendation. I would suggest whatever app you're using, if it has links toward the National Weather Service products and services, that would be the type that I would suggest. Because again, it's not just a raw model output, it's our forecaster infused information that's going to provide the best predictions possible.
Chris, I ask on these podcasts, I try to ask smart questions. Sometimes I ask stupid ones, but I'm not sure where this one's going to fall. So here goes.
Okay, I'm ready.
So here it comes. Get ready. Looking at the products that you guys provide, and there's obviously the surface winds, surface waves. If there's an earthquake somewhere, that generates tsunami warnings. That generates a lot of that. You guys monitor that too somehow?
Yeah. So it turns out the National Weather Service has 2 tsunami centers, and they're regularly monitoring earthquakes around the world, not just near the United States, for the potential for them to cause tsunamis. And so they are charged with providing tsunami advisories and warnings if and when those happen. Of course, there's no tsunami season. That could occur anytime.
Yeah.
And recently the tsunami centers have been incorporated into the Ocean Prediction Center as part of that whole overall marine products and services. I'll also point out that the Ocean Prediction Center has an ice center. In Suitland, Maryland, there is a U.S. National Ice Center that's a combined effort between NOAA, the Navy, and the Coast Guard to help monitor where there's ice over the Great Lakes or over near Alaska or the Arctic to help those kind of predictions as well. So we're trying to really provide kind of a one-stop shop of information for all things marine, whether it's wind and wave forecasts, ice, or tsunamis.
About 80% of our cruisers are typically within, maybe we'll call it the U.S. waters. 20% of our cruisers are outside of the U.S. waters. Is there a global effort that you guys are contributing to that can be seen as no matter where you're out on the planet, here's your best source of information from you guys and from other nations that all contributed to one uniform place? Or is it still fragmented into different agencies from different countries?
Wow. You could not have asked a better question. So within the International Maritime Organization,
don't inflate his ego any more than that, Chris. Okay.
It's we are working toward our holy grail, which is getting our direct wind and wave grids and warning polygons into the electronic charting and navigation systems of mariners. So I'm guessing most cruisers don't have that, but the larger vessels, the cruise ships, the oil tankers, the cargo ships, they all rely on this electronic charting and navigation systems. And the idea is to get everything in this one platform, whether it's the bathymetric information about the water depths, whether it's the ocean current information, whether it's the astronomical tide information, whether it's the Coast Guard regulations, or whether it's our stuff, the winds and waves, in one platform. And that's going to be mandatory within 3 years for us to have that ready to go. And so that's to me a really great thing, because at this point you talk to folks on cargo ships or cruise ships and they're like, yeah, we go to windy.com And I'm like, well, what you really need is kind of everything integrated together. And so there's efforts toward that happening, and it should be ready within 3 years.
Well, I know that there are many cruise ships right now that are being run autonomously.
Mm.
Not cruise ships, but cargo ships. Where yeah, it just seems to me like a lot of things are just going digital all the way around. Our transportation logistics, weather forecasting, integration of data from all kinds of different agencies all into one thing. And everything seems to be digital, and sailors are hoist the sail, give me some wind, and I got it from there.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. There's a beauty in that simplicity as well. However, when it comes to your safety, I think you don't want to forego information that's going to keep you and your family safe.
Sure.
And so if it means spending a couple grand to get Starlink on board, uh, I would recommend that or some other high speed internet provider if there's another alternative. Yeah. I mean, disconnecting. I had friends from college that did around the world with their family in a couple of years on a sailboat. I get that appeal, but you also want to stay safe. So yeah, there's limits to how simple you want to do. You could do like 200 years ago when you looked at the clouds and tried to forecast what's going to happen that way, but I wouldn't bet my life on
You could just lick your finger and stick it straight up in the air and see what happens.
that. Well, if I'm in Miami and I'm outside and I put my finger up, it gets wet anyways because it's so hot and humid down here for 6 months.
At least it
There
won't
you
get
go.
shot off, so you're good there. So, I really appreciate your time today, Chris. This has been a wonderful, bountiful amount of information that all of our cruisers most certainly will soak in, and definitely refer back to. We're going to be putting up some links to some of the different comments and contacts and links that you had provided us as far as products are concerned. And yeah, so David, do we have any final questions for Chris?
Really, no final questions. I think we covered everything. But I mean, when we do these podcasts, they go out on every podcast platform that you can download your podcast from. But we also put it on YouTube because it is a video recorded podcast. This is one of those podcasts that I feel that every downloader, viewer of ours at Three Sheets Podcast is going to want to go to the video version of this because the final edited version of this podcast is going to be very graphic heavy in terms of the different products that you've outlined here for us. Um, Obviously they can go to the, your website and all that, but I think just going through the various different slides that we're going to put into this podcast is going to be very beneficial for a lot of people. So, Chris, I like, a couple years ago when I had a chance to first meet you and interview you, it's a true pleasure. And, I love the fact that you basically work from your backyard. I think that's cool. I've watched your dog circle your pool like 100 times during this podcast. So I think that's kind of cool, but it's so fun talking to you. And I mean, do you ever get tired like going to parties and people just come up to you and say, "What's going on with the hurricanes, Chris? What's happening?" Can they just leave you alone to have a beer sometimes?
Oh, I sometimes I get free beers because of it, so that's a good thing.
That's awesome.
I'd be going to college for that. So, what is the website, Chris? Just go ahead and walk us all the way through it, just in case somebody's driving in their car listening to this and not watching it on TV or on their tube.
Yeah. So hurricanes.gov/marine. And so that's our main website for our products and services. You can get links to where the grids are, and that's the best way right now to get our information on our marine products and services.
Wonderful information that you've been providing us with today. Probably it offered a different perspective and view from many of our cruisers on how they go about doing their lifestyle. So I greatly appreciate it, Chris. It's admirable because this information can help save lives and keep people safe. So we really appreciate your time today, and look forward to the next time we get to chat.
Very much, Eric and David, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk about these products and services as well as our relationship with the Coast Guard there. So thank you so much.
Awesome, dude.
Chris Landsea, National Hurricane Center. I appreciate it, brother.
Thank you.
My mind is made up. I'm gonna sail away. Latitudes and attitudes will help me find my